Welcome to this week's video blog. This week's video blog is going to be my wrap up for September and October. Let's say September, October, November. Because, yeah, I think I finished most of these actually in November, but I started them like September, October. A few books, a few audiobooks, and ebooks that I finished recently, and I'd like to share with you guys. So the first one, I'm actually like that I can get more reading done with audiobooks because pretty much the only time that I really get to read now is either like during my break at the evil day job or on my way to work, because usually when I'm here, or at night, which my nighttime read is still The Shadows by J.R. Ward in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. I'm still reading through that one because that's my nighttime read. That's the one that I read before I go to sleep. So I haven't finished that one yet, so that's still going on. And during my commute to work, I can listen to audiobooks, and that helps me get through a lot more books, which makes me happy, because usually when I'm home, it's this stuff here. It's my writing book, like my own writing that I'm working on, so I don't really have that time to just sit and read. So it's usually on the way to work or at work that I do most of my reading, and that's where audiobooks really helps. So for the first book, I got the covers here for you. Actually, let's do, for the first book, let's do the Kindle that I did. Kindle book that I finished, which is, where are you? See, I thought I was, then I changed it. See, I had the covers for the audiobooks ready to go, and then I just decided randomly, I'm going to start with the ebooks. No, that's not what I meant to do. That's never what I meant to do, whatever the first thing is. Get the cover. Okay, there we are. First book that I finished, Captive in the Dark by C.J. Roberts. Y'all, it was so good. It was so good. I cannot even. This, I'll look back. This girl, she gets kidnapped by this guy because he wants to sell her. He's part of an organization in human sex trafficking, and so his plan is to sell her because he wants to get close to the owner, because he himself was a trafficked child, and he suffered at the hands of this horrible monster of a man who, and he ends up killing his tormentor, but he wants to get the head guy, so he ends up making himself sort of into the monster that he hates to make the connections that he needs to get this guy. And he's working with this other guy who also wants revenge on the same man for murdering his wife and his wife or his daughter, or his wife and his sister. So that's when he grabs the heroine, Livy, and his name is Caleb, and he grabs Livy, and his plan is he takes the girls and he breaks them, as it were, and when they're docile and meek enough and have no fight left in them, he sells them to the organization. And so his plan is to do that with Livy. But of course, things happen, and she gets to him, and it's very dark, and it's very heartbreaking, and just yeah. So there's, I think, 3 books in the series, and I finished number 1. And after I finished number 1, I needed a moment. I couldn't just go, even though it ends on such like an insane, tense cliffhanger. I couldn't go straight into book 2. I needed one, I didn't have it ready on my Kindle, because usually if it's a series thing and it's a new author to me, I don't get like the whole series at once. I try out with the first book, and then if I don't like it, then I don't bother with the rest of the series. So with this one, I waited, and I yeah, I adored it, but I needed a moment to sort of like get through the stress of reading that book. It was a beautiful book. I loved it, but it was very emotional and dark, and just ugh. So I'm very much looking forward to book 2. But for a breather in the meantime, I am almost finished. I am almost finished. I clicked you. Do your thing. I'm almost finished From Sand and Ash by Amy Harmon. I'm at 81% right now, so I'm almost finished. It's so good. It's about these 2 people who they grew up together. She's an Italian Jew, and he is an American that comes to live with their family as a little boy, and he becomes a priest later, and she go back to where it was. Back to, yes, back to that's what I wanted. And so he becomes a priest, and before he becomes a priest, obviously they grow up together, and they fall in love. And then World War II happens, and so he's a priest helping the Jews in the underground, and keeping them hidden and all that. And it's very World War II is my catnip. Forbidden Love with Priests is my catnip. Y'all, like the Thornbirds, I'm here for this. So yeah, that's what I'm reading in between, before I start book 2 in the Captive series. Did I finish any more ebooks? I think it was just that ebook that I finished. Audiobook wise, I did pretty well these past few months. I finished Awaken by Nina Lane, and it's the 3rd book in the Spiral of Bliss series, and I thought it was the last book, but it's not. There's like, I think, 7 books in the series. I had no idea. I thought Awaken was the last book. I loved that, what I thought was a trilogy at the time. Not a trilogy. It was so good. Dean West, Olivia. Oh, I loved them so much. He was like this strong guy who was just obsessed with, well, her, but in the sense of he was sort of the golden child of his family, and something happened that caused an upset in his family, and he felt responsible for it. And so ever since, he's sort of been trying to make up for it by being this perfect academically, perfect professionally man. And yeah, hopefully that's okay. And he meets Olivia, when he is a professor at a university and she's a student, not his student, but a student at the university. And he falls in love with her and they fall in love. And she is sort of this child who grew up with this like flaky mother who was just this horrible, horrible woman. Not physically abusive necessarily, but very like emotionally abusive. And so leaves, she runs away from her mother, I think when she's like 13, and goes to live with her aunt and her uncle, who are very like sort of strict. And she doesn't mind that really much at all because she's lived her whole life without any structure because her mother uh, was just sort of like making her way through life and going from like place to place and never had any money and um, would bring like all these men home, and I think she would kind of whore herself out too. Um, and so she breaks away from her mother and sort of makes her own life and meets Dean, and they fall in love, and it's wonderful, but it's not perfect, and I love that it's not perfect because per- perfect characters are boring. Like you don't want to read about perfect people. Um, so they go through a lot, and especially in this last book, uh, Dean is accused of sexual misconduct with one of his students, who gets mad at him because he won't help her with this assignment that she has not done any work for, and is not like, she's basically at the university because her father is sort of has a lot of power kind of thing, and if she doesn't like pass her grades or whatever, he won't she won't be able to work at his law firm. Um, so this girl raises these accusations against Dean, and it's awful, and um, it's just an amazing, amazing book. The scene in the courtroom with Dean, and when his students like speak up for him, and just, oh my god, it was just beautiful. Um, and the mother, I still don't like her, but they kind of make their peace with each other, and I guess that's nice. But I still don't like the mother. So I thought that was the end of the series, but it wasn't. Cause in at the end of it, she's gonna have a baby, and it's it's nice, and they're like in a beautiful place, and also his brother gets a book, like sort of like in the middle of the series, the Dean and West series. There's a standalone book, I believe, with his brother, which I'm glad for because I liked the brother. The brother is Asher or Archer, something like that. He is sort of this. He's the black sheep. Dean is like the straight-laced um, golden boy, and Asher is the opposite of that. So he gets his own book, and I'm glad about that. And then there are, I think, like 2 more books with Dean and Liv, which makes me happy. So I still have to get to those. Um, so yeah, that was the first audio book that I finished. Then I finished. Where are you at? Which one are you? Oh yes, Prince Charming by C.D. Rice. C.D. Rice is like my new auto-buy author. Ever since I read her marriage games, the marriage games and separation games, the duology. Ever since I read those 2, I've wanted to get more from this author. I've got King of Code, I think it's called King of Code, in paperback up there somewhere, up there. And I started Prince Charming in audiobook. It was so nice. It was so nice. It was Keaton and Cassie is an FBI um, agent, and Keaton is this suspected underground dark web like hacker person, or not like he has to do with like that whole thing, and but he's not all that it seems. Um, so and Cassie is charged with bringing him down. But of course, things happen, and she learns things about him that she did not know. And there's action, there's um, there's sex, there's angst. I loved Keaton and Cassie so much. So much. They were so good. It was so good. I completely recommend that book to you guys. And then I read some good books these past few months, y'all. And then I read Last Hit by Jessica Clare in audiobook. Y'all, this book was so good. Oh my god. Daisy and Nikolai. Nikolai is a hitman. And he's part of the Russian mob, and they they do these like horrible things to horrible people. I mean, they don't necessarily go after innocents, but they still kill people. And he's part of it. He was taken in, I think, when he was 15. I think that's when he first became the hitman. But I think he was taken into the organization when he was like 9. As like I think he was an orphan. Um, and sort of raised in that. And then the leader of the organization gets murdered, and he wants to bring the person who killed his mentor down. But also along the way, he falls in love with Daisy. Now, Daisy is this sweet, innocent girl who has been living with this not horrible, but just this. Her father witnessed, or I'm not sure if he witnessed, but his wife died. His wife was murdered, and the killer, when he was arrested, threatened that when he got out, he would seek revenge on the father, and so the father becomes this paranoid, agoraphobic man who stifles Daisy and keeps her locked up in his house and barely lets her out, and the windows are boarded up, and finally she escapes and goes to the city to sort of live her life in freedom when she meets Nikolai the hitman. Now, she doesn't know he's a hitman, obviously. She thinks the worst thing that he's done is maybe like he could be a hacker, and so maybe that's why he's sort of like uptight and secretive and all this. Um, and it's just their beautiful story. Now, when she moves to the city, Daisy meets Regan, who is lives in the apartment that she uh, ends up renting. She becomes Regan's roommate, and Regan calls her Pollyanna because Daisy is just so innocent and so sweet. Um, and then something happens. Regan and Daisy get kidnapped towards the end, and Nikolai has this, not necessarily a friend, because Nikolai, he's very like sort of closed off and he doesn't trust people easily, but there's this guy who kind of like doesn't let Nikolai sort of like like he helps him out with like life sort of things, and like when Nikolai like is falling in love with Daisy and he doesn't know how to be with Daisy because all he's ever known is this mob life and this the life of a killer. And the guy that he meet, like Daniel, who's also like in the organization, used to be like a sniper, or used to be something in the army, like a mercenary or something like that, and now he's a hitman as well. But he's had like a good like outside kind of life, so he knows things about like relationships and that, and he kind of helps Daniel, or he helps Nikolai navigate a little bit how to be with Daisy. Um, so I liked their relationship very much. Um, and then towards the end, Daisy and Regan get kidnapped, and Daisy gets saved, but we Regan gets lost by in the they get separated, and so we don't know what happened to Regan. We just know that the Russian guys who had kidnapped the two of them took her and disappeared with her. So then we learned that Nikolai sent Daniel to go look for her. And so I was like hoping so hard that Regan gets her own book and that it's with Daniel. And then I saw book two, and it is! It's Regan and Daniel's story. And I've started that one now, and it's so good. It's so good. I'm so enjoying it so much. Um, so I think I'm trying to think if that I think that was it of yeah. So I'm in book two in the Hitman series by Jessica Clare. Totally loving it. In ebook, I'm reading From Sand and Ash by Amy Harmon. And I think that's going to be it for this week's video blog. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/authorejamie. Like my Facebook page at facebook.com/authorejamie. I'm talking and I'm trying to remember if I'm forgetting anything. Um, I think that was, yeah, I think that's going to be it. So I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.